Hey, buddy, welcome to Mat Men, your source for all things professional wrestling. I'm Andrew Zarin. I'm joined by the modern-day podcaster, Rich Stambolian.
Oh, so good. You did it. But you have to introduce yourself as the original podcaster.
I am the original podcaster. You know what? I am one of the original podcasters. I'm
That is
going
true.
back 12 years. 12 years ago was my first podcast. So I'm an OG in this game.
Before that shit got popular. Like,
Way
crazy
before.
popular.
You know what's really funny? I used to
what?
lie to people. And
Mhm.
I used to lie to people because I couldn't explain to them what a podcast was. So I used to tell them I was on Sirius.
Okay.
I'm like, oh, satellite radio. I'm on XM Sirius. Like, then they're like, oh, okay. You're not really on the radio, but you're somewhere. Because you'd be like, I do a podcast. They're like, a what? A podcast?
Yeah, it's weird because I think it depends on who you're talking to. I feel like a lot of people who aren't really into using their internet on their phone are like, oh, you're on the radio? No.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean that thing I never look at on my iPhone that says
Yeah,
podcast app? What
Yeah.
is that? And you got to explain how to use their phone, and then they're like, nobody loves me.
Listen, I'm the OG, like Ice-T at this point in podcasting. Listen, we have a ton to talk about today. Tremendous to talk about. Last night's show. What's funny, Rich?
I do enjoy the juxtaposition of you comparing yourself to famous rappers.
I tend to do that all the time. Like the other day, I'm like, listen, I'm sleazy like Easy, you know?
You're never like, yo, I'm the James Hetfield of podcasting. It's always like,
No, I'm
man,
the Lars.
straight up the Ice-T of podcasting right now.
I'm having too much fun and the show hasn't even begun. Whoa, this is wonky, these glasses. All right,
I think you got to see a doctor. I thought those were your eyes for a second.
That's on my eyes. Guys, tremendous night for pro wrestling last night. A lot of stuff happened. So we're going to go into, I want to thank MG Geek for providing us with notes. This has been a nutty week in my life. MG Geek has a ton of notes for us. Big shout out to him. Everybody thank him in the chat room if you see him. I do want to start off with some really sad news, and that's Pat Patterson. Rich and I have always been a big Pat Patterson fan. I think a lot of people don't know what an instrumental part he played in Vince getting WWE, you know, after purchasing it from his father and turning Pat into an office guy. There's such an amazing story here. I'm looking forward to Meltzer's Observer, I guess, obituary on Patterson because there's so much stuff here, but huge star in the territory days, huh?
Yeah, dude. Like he's like the epitome of pro wrestling, isn't he?
Really is. Came up in a very bizarre era. Most likely the first openly gay pro wrestler, especially in a time where it was taboo, extremely taboo. You know, there's a lot of stories about how, you know, when he went to San Francisco, the promoter was not a fan of his because he did not like gay people. But the second he saw Pat and the way that he conducted himself and the way that he worked, the whole thing went away. There's a lot of these stories where, you know, you talk about the current time and the current climate, and then you talk about the 1960s and 70s, where we're not very different eras. And he was openly embraced by promoters, by the wrestlers, and I think that's a very interesting story, and I'm hoping that Dave kind of goes into that, you know, and talks about it, because it's an interesting story, and you see a lot in Pat's book. He wrote a great book with a lot of details about this. But, you know, a big star in the territories in the Northeast, U.S., and in Canada, started off in Montreal, headed to Boston. They brought him into Portland. I believe it was... who brought him in? Mad Dog brought him into Portland, I believe. Then ended up what? Mad Dog Vachon, yeah. Was it Mad Dog? Yeah, Mad Dog Vachon brought him. Brought him in there and goes to San Francisco. Tag teams with Ray Stevens, one of the biggest single stars of that era in the 1970s. Becomes a tremendous tag team. Ends up leaving, goes to WWE. Becomes a first Intercontinental Champion, winning the tournament in Rio de Janeiro. Right?
Now,
that never took place.
Am I wrong in saying that he pretty much brought pro wrestling to San Francisco, and San Francisco was never and still isn't like a big wrestling territory, right?
It was big. Ray Stevens was a huge star there, but he did bring a lot of prominence to like that Northern California scene because he was such a big star. Like the Cow Palace was, his home. He was very instrumental in kind of growing the West Coast. Like, I even think Portland wrestling, and a lot of people don't talk about that territory, he played a huge part in the boom for Portland.
Okay.
Great mind, always well-liked. And just think about this guy's career, like you look at a lot of the obstacles he faced, became a big star in the territory days, and then goes to WWE at the end of his career. He has those bloodbaths at the Garden with,
oh my God,
with Sarge and all these other guys. Tremendous matches. At the time, it was considered one of like the most instrumental parts in wrestling. Those late 70s matches. I think it was 78, 79. When did he do this? He was brought in to feud with Backlund originally. Right. And the story is interesting that he came into feud with Backlund, but he was so over as a babyface, they never went with that. They didn't really continue that feud because he got over so big as a babyface, and a lot of instrumental parts in that era, which they don't talk about too often.
Well, also kind of invented the Royal Rumble, right? There were battle royals. To begin with, there was always a battle royal, but like he was the one who kind of said, let's take it the next step further. He booked it. He's the one who came up with tons of original matches in the heyday of like Hulkamania, WrestleMania, like up until I want to say like even towards the end of the Attitude Era, right? Like he was still kind of in people's ears saying like, hey, you know what? This might be better.
Yeah, he was in a lot of people's ear. Yeah. So you brought up the Royal Rumble, which is interesting. The Royal Rumble, was a spin on the San Francisco Battle Royal, and that was a spin on the Hawaiian Battle Royal. So he kind of took the elements from both, and he created this probably, I would say one of the most, I think for WWE and somebody in our generation, Rich, probably one of the most instrumental parts of why we became wrestling fans. Like, it was, obviously Hogan and Warrior, but like for me, the first moment that I was like, oh my God, I love wrestling like this was the Royal Rumble.
Really, that's like kind of what did it. It was always fun for me. Like I always look forward to the Rumble, and then like as I got older and became an adult, I found more interest in the Rumble because we would always bet on the Rumble and do like those Rumble pools, So it was kind of like it made it even more fun.
Yeah, I see. I like WrestleMania when we're like, especially now since we cover this stuff. WrestleMania's work for me. Like, that's how I see it. Like, I kind of dread, in a weird way, and I'm not saying this in negative, but I kind of dread it compared to other shows because I got to put in a lot of work for WrestleMania week. We're selling ads, we're doing all this. But Royal Rumble, sometimes if you notice, we don't do a show on Royal Rumble because that's my holiday. I enjoy it. I like to sit down with Rich and everybody else that comes by and hang out and watch the Rumble like that. I think this year it's going to be a very different scenario. We're not going to have a big Royal Rumble party.
It's the one time a year I let you sit on my lap.
He does, and we play Puppet Boy. We play a game called Puppet Boy where he puppets me.
You don't want to know where that hand's been.
I don't want to tell them. I don't want to tell them where it's been. It's a family show.
And then he transitioned that whole like all that awesome stuff already into being one of the best comedy acts along with Joe Briscoe.
The Stooges.
Being the Stooges.
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
So something that I wanted to jump before that because it's not really talked a lot, but you want to talk about, he was a big part in getting into Vince's ear to push smaller guys.
Yes.
The two that really come to mind when you talk about this are Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. Huge advocate for both of them. Shawn was on Vince's high list always, but Bret was never the guy that was going to be the world champion. Vince did not see it, and it was all Pat Patterson. It was all Pat that pushed that Bret Hart, and me, of course, because I saw him at SummerSlam 91, and I turned to my father at the time. I was 6 years old. I turned to my dad, and I said, Dad, you see that guy in the ring? That's the guy. He's got it.
I imagine when you were a kid, you used to call your dad Mr. Dad.
Mr. Dad, and I lit a cigarette. I lit a big giant cigar, and I started smoking it at the Garden.
Let me tell you something, Mr. Dad.
Yeah, Mr. Dad. Let me tell you. Do you see this guy over there? He's money. So I think before we get into this, like, think about the impact that he had, and also the influence he played in Vince's bizarre acquisition of WWE. I hope that Dave kind of goes into that next week. And if you're not a Meltzer fan, as far as a historical standpoint, there's nobody that does it better than him when it comes to this. I highly recommend you checking this out. And then, like you mentioned, we went into the Stooge era, the greatest.
Now, how subversive was that to the point where people who saw Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe didn't realize how much wrestling history would come out and be in the ring along with Stone Cold, Mr. McMahon, Mankind, like all these dudes?
Do you, it is, here's the thing. When you watched then, right? Because he would have been in his 50s, in his mid 50s, right? Because he's born 41. So 81, he would have been 40. 91, he would have been 50. So he was at the later, he was in his mid 50s, 55, 56, 57. Did you see him as a 50-something? Like, we got 50-year-old wrestlers now. Like, did you see him as a 50-year-old wrestler or just like an old man that worked in the back?
I thought they were way older than what their actual ages were. And I also feel like that's in part of like, like when you're an old school wrestler, like that was like a hard life, right? Like they weren't treated like elite athletes like they are now. There was like a lot of road miles on these guys.
Tons of miles.
Like Terry Funk's a good example too. Like when Terry Funk did that first ECW pay-per-view, I thought Terry Funk was maybe close to 70.
Because they sold it as he was an old man that was crazy and he was going to kill himself, but he was in his early 50s. Middle-aged and deranged, right? Wasn't that it?
It's nuts. And also, like, when all the Stooges stuff happened, like, I think I vividly remember maybe having, like, a 28.8 modem. So, like, doing your research was, like, there was stuff out there, but it was also JR's commentary of, my God, it's the first Intercontinental Champion. What's he doing right now? Et cetera, et cetera. So you didn't really get a grasp of that until later.
Yeah. I very instrumental part in pro wrestling as we know it today. Huge influence on many, many guys. Like, a lot of people could actually attribute The Rock's success in him becoming The Rock to Pat Patterson. Pat played a huge part in The Rock's career. And if it wasn't for Pat Patterson, it's very possible we never got to see The Rock like we saw him. These are those little things that we never take into account when we kind of look at the history and like those little things that kind of change everything.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's nice to look back and say, you know what? If it wasn't for this, he's not a key player on TV. He's not one of the names that you hear as being very political, but he is one of the reasons why this happened.
Absolutely. And plus, like, he's one of those dudes that it seems like nobody had a bad word to say about him.
There were a few. Piper was not a fan. Bruno had mentioned a couple things about him, but again, I think a lot of that has to do with possibly the times, and again, you gotta. And I don't want to get into all of that stuff because we're talking about him and passing out, and I want to talk about his career more than his personal life, but. It couldn't have been easy considering he was around at a time where a lot of these bizarre accusations were happening under his watch as vice president. And, may or may not have been inappropriate behavior, but, you're talking the 1970s and 1980s and the early 1990s in pro wrestling, very different standard that we hold people to now.
Oh, absolutely. But, apart from all that, it seems like the outpouring of love for the guy over the last like day and a half has been nothing short of tremendous. And also that package they did for him on NXT with karaoke, the guy loved his karaoke. That was a real tearjerker. I know MG Geek was texting us yesterday about like, how he got like real emotional. I got real emotional when I watched it. Ooh. How about you?
Yeah,
zero emotion from you.
Zero emotion. No, you know what? I came in late. I'm dealing with like 500 different projects right now, so I came in a little late. So I actually missed it, and I didn't want to watch it while I was busy. I'm actually going to watch it today.
Excellent. So yeah, you're gonna cry. You got to set aside.
I probably will.
Minutes.
I cried during the Paul Bearer one. That was really sad for me.
Oh my god.
Oh, that was like the saddest one. I think that's one of the best ones that they've done as far as. And I haven't seen the Pat one, so we'll see it. The Oakland one was really sad too.
Yeah. Listen, man. Like we're at that kind of age of fandom where like these guys are not getting any younger.
Yeah. Well, listen, this is the time, right? We're going to see a lot of our guys from the 80s and even early 90s. Unfortunately, time is coming.
So depressing.
It is very depressing. So to kind of go on to some positivity, guys, I want to remind everybody, if you enjoy the podcast, you enjoy the show, you could join our Patreon, patreon.com/MattMenPodcast. You can fund us there as little as $1 per month. And it goes a long way. You want to give us more money? Give us more money. Of course, we'll take it. Also, if you're watching live on YouTube, you could always hit that super chat button. Give us your dollars. Show us your support. Hit that $ button and give us whatever you want to give us. It's the holidays. I got to buy a lot of gifts for Rich. He gets very angry when I don't buy him presents. Very, very.
I'm not
upset.
a cheap date. I am not a cheap date. I am very high maintenance. I don't know if you guys knew this. Super, super high maintenance.
Super high maintenance, dude. So let's kind of go into everything that the fallout of the last couple days. What'd you think of Raw?
It was all right. It was fine. Like
the opener was cool.
The opener was cool, and then I kind of quickly lost interest. It was what it was. Like, I'm not saying that the show is irredeemable, because as a wrestling fan, you always want it to be better. But it was okay. It was more solid than it's been solid lately.
Yeah.
But as I'm not whatever. Kind of a sleeper for me.
Yeah, I really enjoy the opener. I really like what they're doing with the Fiend. It is interesting how Randy Orton is being put in a more of like a devious role compared to the Fiend. Like, the Fiend's the babyface, and Randy Orton's such a bad guy that he's even worse than a monster.
Yeah. And didn't he make Alexa look super, super tiny?
He did
at the beginning.
He did
at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, he did. So they did that, and also AJ Styles is the #1 contender.
Pretty cool.
So this maybe changes things, going forward. Like, we're changing the mix up again. I think Styles being involved in there would be a really good in between pay-per-view guy. I'm curious if it's something that they want to go forward with.
Mm-hmm.
And go in that direction. I don't know.
I got a question for you.
Yes.
Okay, so I know I just want to talk about this super briefly, right?
Yeah.
But you have like another weird point in modern history where most Bullet Club dudes are on top of the wrestling business.
Yes. Yeah.
AJ Styles could possibly win that title. Kenny's the new champ. Gallows and Anderson are the tag champs. The Bucks are the tag champs. And Kenta is going for that United States title, even though he's modern Bullet Club.
Modern. Yeah,
it's very fascinating. And Finn also.
When Finn Balor, yeah, I actually, if you look at that as an act, it's one of the most successful acts that they've ever in modern wrestling, right? Or even 80s era. Has there ever been a group, a stable, where they've had so many, high level performers come out of it? If you look at it, obviously you got Styles, you got Finn. You got the Bucks, like you said. You got Gallows and Anderson. Who else came out of there as like a top guy? Like, popularity wise, I mean, these guys all did well. Marty was on a roll for a while.
Oh, forget it. Yeah,
Adam Cole. Yeah, Adam Cole, another guy. So that's actually an interesting look at it, how successful these guys have gotten.
It's a different era too, because everybody wants to make those NWO comparisons, but like you said a couple of minutes ago, these guys were higher level athletes pretty much than the NWO ever was.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the NWO was like a 4-man show. It really came down to Hogan, Nash, Hall, and inject whoever that other guy would be at the moment, whether it's a Big Show or somebody else. It was never a top tier. I mean, I know Bret Hart was in it, Macho was in it, but it wasn't. It was late. They didn't. The guys that were made in the NWO were already made.
Exactly.
The Bullet Club elevated everybody. It helped them more. It wasn't at the end of their career. AJ Styles is probably the only one that was already established, but look what it did for his career to that level.
Absolutely, dude. Like he was already at like kind of like a top, like I wouldn't say like an indie darling, but it was a surprise when he went over to Japan, and his trajectory just like it really took off after that.
Cody, another Bullet guy.
Yeah, Cody, another Bullet guy. Yes, he's another Bullet man.
Another Bullet man. So Raw was fine. If you want
Yeah.
to go, it was okay. It was.
I think they
it is
should
what
put
it
the
is.
title on AJ. Sorry.
Okay. No, I think that would be really cool. NXT last night. I gotta say, I wasn't concentrating much on NXT because the AEW show was it was a very large show, but some pretty good stuff there. They set up War Games. I believe this is the first time that the babyfaces have the advantage going into War Games.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right.
Which I'm curious to see. I think the War Games pay-per-view is going to be really good. If you want to go down this, we'll go down this card really quick.
Do you want to go? Sorry.
I would like to do a watch along, but it really depends how my weekend is going to go. So I can't commit to it right now because I have to produce a crazy event the next 4 days. So we'll go down this card. If you have it, do you want to do it, Rich, or you want me to run down this card?
I will look at the card. I think let's run down the card and let's give our quick predictions.
Okay. So you got Timothy Thatcher and Ciampa in a singles match. Mm-hmm. I go with Ciampa on this.
I'll go Timothy Thatcher on this one.
Okay.
I feel like they're trying to build him up a little bit.
Okay, this is going to be a very good match, by the way, because Timothy Thatcher, he's a phenomenal wrestler. He never did it for me on the independents because he was such a different style compared to what was happening at the time. I do like how they put him on TV, and this is a great example of WWE's machine, taking a guy that's fundamentally so good and just turning it up and teaching them how to turn it up a little bit and getting something out of it. This is a very different Timothy Thatcher compared to the independent, compared to the indie version.
I think the indie version, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would equate it to like you're watching a Luthez on a card that has Ricochet and Cedric Alexander on it. You know,
dude, that is probably the best way of describing it. Best way.
Yeah, which is great. You know, like I was very enjoyable. I think we watched him versus Drew Lag a couple of times.
I like Drew Lag, dude.
I think we watched him versus Drew Gulak a couple of times, and that, you know, there were long, very long matches with a lot of holds, and I think on one of them you turned to me and you were like, "This isn't doing it for me," and then you left.
yeah, that was it. So that's a match on the card. We also have Dexter Lumis and Cameron Grimes. Everybody loves Dexter Lumis. Apparently, that whole company, they're in love with him. Yeah. They're in love, top to bottom. They're in love with Dexter Lumis, and they're trying to figure out how to make this guy the man to some extent.
Yeah. Got a good look.
Very good look. Interesting character. Let's see where it goes. Very early though. Cameron Grimes and Dexter Lumis are that next generation of NXT talent that's going to be elevated in the next, I want to say, 6 to 8 months. This is the beginning of this.
They love Cameron Grimes too, man. He's got that, like, I think they like him because he's kind of like a legacy guy, and also he's got a Michael Hayes vibe going.
Very much so.
What do we got next? We got Leon Ruff versus Johnny Gargano versus Damian Priest in a triple threat match for the North American Championship.
This should be a very good match.
I feel like 20 years ago this would have been a comedy match because Damian Priest is so big
and the other two are so tiny.
Right, but I think I'm gonna go Leon Ruff retaining somehow.
Okay, I this is the one that worries me a little bit, but it is what it is. We'll see. Then we have Team Shotzi Blackheart, Ember Moon, Rhea Ripley, and Io Shirai versus Team Candice LeRae, Dakota Kai, Raquel Gonzalez, and Toni Storm in a heel Toni Storm in a War Games match. I see. I this is so weird, right? Because Rhea is such a natural heel, and Tony's such a natural babyface. I get why Rhea Ripley became a face, but there's no need to keep her a face at this point. You could switch the two.
Absolutely.
Have her be the challenger for the title. Have her be a monster. I like that Shotzi's getting a big push now.
Yes.
They see something special in her. Obviously, we've talked about it. I think she has such a tremendous look. So, who do you think takes this?
I'm gonna go the heels on this one. I do think I feel like this should be the main event. Though both those teams are super, super solid, and anything with Rhea Ripley is gonna be fantastic. Anything with Tony Storm or Io Shirai or Candice LeRae is going to be fantastic. And you have the addition of Dakota Kai or Raquel Gonzalez. I think it kind of makes it more fun. And when they turned Dakota Kai heel, it did nothing but help that character.
Yeah.
And the addition of Shotzi too. I think the heels are going to take this one though.
Yeah. Now we have the main event. It's Undisputed Era. Cole, O'Reilly, Strong, and Bobby Fish against McAfee. I don't know why. I got to tell you something. I'm good with Irish names. I really am. But for whatever reason, my brain cannot process the difference between McAfee and McAfee. I know it's McAfee. I know it's McAfee. Right. I know it is. But my brain just cannot do that trick. It's McAfee. It's Pete Dunne, Danny Burch, and Oney Lorcan in a War Games match. Main event.
It's going to be good, man.
Yeah.
This is going to be a fun match because Undisputed Era has done nothing but deliver. How cool is that? How cool is that Undisputed Era has done nothing but deliver since their inception on NXT? If they were a main roster act, they would have been broken up 6 ways to Sunday.
Oh, my God. They would have done all of it, right? They would have done all the combinations. They would have done every single version of it. This one turns on this one. This one gets upset. They've teased it on NXT, but you know what? Yeah. Sometimes you look at that and you got to take it as, do you ever get mad at your friends? Yeah, sure. Do you ever have like a heated discussion? Sure. Do you ever get have a strategic discussion? Yeah, sure. And I think that's what they've done with these guys. They've alluded to problems, but they've always stayed together, which is something rare.
Yeah.
Very rare.
It's especially in wrestling, like when you have like a 4-man group that's united, it's a rarity in the modern era of wrestling, Yeah.
I also like that we're seeing alliances. That's another thing we're seeing.
Yes. Big time. NXT is a good show.
Yeah, NXT is very good. Always is. Even when they're bad, they're still better than most other ones. So I'm looking forward to this on Sunday. I'm gonna attempt to do it. I can't, and I hate being vague with this stuff, but it's been a crazy couple weeks here. So I'm gonna try. If we do it, we'll do fun. We'll have a couple drinks. We'll hang out. It'll be a reason for me to celebrate also because I'm gonna be working like 10 hours a day for the next 3 days on this project. So it'll be a nice fun event. Maybe I'll take an edible and lose my mind on the air again.
I think you should.
That's what we'll do. Maybe that's what we'll do. I'll turn into the Anunnaki finally. All right, let's talk about the big show. Let's talk about the big show, not the TV show. I'm talking about AEW Dynamite.
I don't think the Big Show should have done that Netflix series. If you're gonna,
my daughter loves it. My daughter loves him, and demands to watch it, and then wants to watch Big Show matches. And it's so bizarre to me. She's like, no, I want to see, and she calls him the Big Show. She doesn't call him the Big Show. She's like, I want to see a Big Show match. Put it on. And I'm like, what the hell can I put on for her?
You know what I think you should do? I saw that you guys got your Elf in the Shelf back, which is awesome for the kids. I think one of the presents should be a Big Show figure for Taylor.
Oh my God. That's actually hysterical. That's actually really funny. I'm going to get it. And see what
her reaction is.
I don't want this. That's what she's going to say.
She'd curse at you. She'd be like, what the fuck is this?
What's wrong with you, man? What's wrong with you?
All right. So, how did you like Dynamite?
Great show, man. Very good show. Very, very good show. Winter is coming was the theme. They did a very good job with this. The show did feel special. Now, imagine what it would have been like with a live audience. Okay? This is one of those moments that we talk about this, right? Like, I think AEW's done a very good job dealing with the fact that they're in a strange building. They've made it look the best that they can. They made it feel great with the people on the side. And they have a very small audience. But imagine if this was taking place in a Philly or a Chicago or a New York, North Carolina, Georgia, so a major market with, 10 to 12,000 people in the building.
Oh my God, forget it. It would have blown the roof off the place. I think people would have tuned in more as they're passing if they heard that insane crowd reaction, right? Because the whole night was full of like really cool stuff, and I didn't see it coming. But starting the show with a battle royal, pretty cool.
Yeah, go into it, Rich.
So we had like a battle royal at the top of the show, and it was the two winners, which is like the interesting stipulation. The two winners have to face each other the next week, and then the winner of that match goes on to have a match with the champion.
Yeah.
Am I right about that?
They get the ring.
They get the ring, right. And MJF has the ring now, so it comes down to MJF and Orange Cassidy, which should be a fun match, you know?
Yeah.
AEW does a really good job of proper booking, you know, like Orange Cassidy was in a hot angle. Doesn't mean that he has to go nowhere. He's doing something else now that doesn't have to be in the main event, right?
Yeah, and here's the other thing, right? Like we look at what WWE does, and there's a lot of one criticism that I have seen with AEW that I kind of agree with is that their mid card is sitting there, and they have a lot of talent that people want to see do more, but they're just sitting there. And I think that and that speaks a lot about the product, and I think people feel that way is because they're invested in these guys. You know,
Absolutely.
you look at the roster, and unlike the WWE, which and it bothers me that they can't break through with this. It's almost like how the WWE in the Attitude Era, you know, the mid card was a hot act. I'm not saying the matches were great, but the act was hot. You know, you think of a WWE mid card, thinking Ken Shamrock, you're thinking Val Venus, you're
Godfather.
thinking Goldust, Godfather, Scotty 2 Hotty, you know, Brian Christopher, Scotty 2 Hotty. You're talking all these mid card guys. It was a fun act, and you enjoyed watching them.
Yeah.
On this side, these guys, you're enjoying watching them, but you're saying, okay, when is it their turn? So it's cool to see people so invested in the talent, but sometimes you got to let things play out. You can't rush the mid card to be on that top side. You know, Orange Cassidy is a great example. They got to decide who the future of this company is. Listen, it's not going to be Orange Cassidy, but to have him as a companion in these matches, very important because it's getting people interested. People want to see this happen. So we got that. We got Jericho and Frankie Kazarian.
Solid match. Hard hitting.
Solid, yeah.
You know, two vets going at it.
Jericho looks like he's about to shatter when he falls. You know, he's hit that point. He's very stiff.
He just looks heavy.
He looks heavy. He's very dense. He's a
dense guy, man. Yeah, he's a dense guy, like super athletic and also very like now but he's always been dense, right? If you watch any of those Japanese matches at kind of like the start of his career or during WCW, like he's always been kind of like a dense guy.
Yeah. He's very dense.
So the end of that match, you had MJF coming to the ring, about to throw in the towel for Jericho. Sammy Guevara stops him, and then you get a tease of is the inner circle going to break up because now they have 7 members that can't get along.
Yeah, I don't want to see the breakup. I really don't. But if we do a breakup, I don't want them to break up Santana and Ortiz, for example. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't want that because these guys are so good together, and they you know, if you take them away from the act of the inner circle, they're in a title picture for sure. They're world, they're tag team champion challenges, and I would love to see that in this act. I think it's buying them time, which is a positive because right now you're trying to move things around. I don't want to see the breakup, but I understand it may be time.
I'm gonna say no, it's not time yet. I think you're gonna have the restructuring where I think maybe it's a ploy to really have a big feud between Jericho and MJF.
And then Jericho makes MJF the guy?
Yeah, Jericho makes MJF, and you're going to get like a bunch of... See, I wouldn't... I don't mind a program where it's Jericho and Hager versus MJF and Wardlow for a few weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. They can do so much stuff with these guys. And you know what? I think they're all good on the mic with the exception of Wardlow and Swagger or Hager or whatever, just because like they don't have enough mic time, right?
Maybe they will. Do you think so? Do you think they're going to go that direction with them to give them more time like that?
I'd like to see Wardlow on the mic more. Like the more I watch Wardlow, the more I'm fascinated by the guy for some reason. Maybe it's because he fits that WWE mold so well, and maybe that's what I'm conditioned to like.
Yeah.
I also think that AEW should co-opt War Games and have Wardlow host it and just call it Ward Games.
Ward Game. I like that too. You're on a roll today, Rich. I like your suggestions.
A lot of caffeine.
Yeah. What else happened?
You had a Young Bucks talking segment with Alex Marvez in which they were attacked. They these guys called the Acclaim came out, cut a promo on them, and then they were attacked by Jack Evans and Angelico.
Yeah. They have not been around much.
Those two guys?
Yeah.
I feel like those guys are very hard to fit into the grand scheme of things, right?
Yeah, because they're very good workers. Like, tremendous, but I don't know. I don't know how much their style appeals, you know, because there's so many versions of them, really.
I mean, like we're trying to quickly get through. AEW was jam packed last night. You had Britt Baker versus Layla Hirsch, who's like a new acquisition for them, and she's like I'm trying to remember correctly what Layla Hirsch is. She's an amateur wrestler who is from Russia and adopted by American parents.
Okay, so there's a story there.
Right. And then, you know, she had a great match with Britt Baker. Thunder Rosa comes out and attacks Britt Baker. Nice pull apart between both of them.
Yeah. Yeah, that was done really well. So here's where things get very interesting.
Bonkers.
Darby Allin and Cody versus Team Taz. So they had the match. After Darby picks up the win, Team Taz attacks them and lays everybody out, including Arn Anderson. And then...
oh, my God.
It's Sting!
Did you have a heart attack?
Yes, actually, because I'll tell you what happened. So I was watching AEW, okay?
Yeah.
Jess hit the remote, and like it turned it off. It turned off my YouTube TV. So I put on AEW, and I started watching. And I'm watching and I'm typing, right? I'm doing work and I'm watching. And Josh Coleman messages me and he goes, "It's Sting. Sting's here." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Because he sometimes does that to like mess with me. Because if he knows I'm not maybe watching, he'll like say something crazy. And I'm like, "No, he's not." And I'm watching. I'm like, "Dude, I'm watching the show." And I realize it's a show from 3 weeks ago.
Oh, no.
Like, I watched up until that point, up until this, because I saw the match happen. And when I came back, again, it was Taz still in the ring. It was a Taz segment. So I'm like, okay, maybe the match ended when I left, when I came back. And I had to go back and I rewatched it. But, man, that was awesome. Really awesome.
They did it. So here's another perspective on it. You know, like we were tweeting about it, and I was very surprised to see like people dumping on it.
What were they saying?
Basically, like it's, you know, like I feel like certain wrestling fans have a mentality where they're in a writer's room and that their ideas aren't the ones on TV, so they get like really miffed about it. You know,
very well put. By the way,
guess what? You're not right. You're not writing a screenplay called AEW. You know, just like take it as what it is. The setup for it, fantastic. Sting coming out, fantastic. He didn't have to do anything. They capitalized on his presence in a big way. Looking at Arn Anderson, looking at Cody, right? Looking at Cody, looking at Dustin, looking at Darby Allin. So you know what? He didn't have to do anything. He cleared the ring on presence alone. They announced that Sting is signed for a multi-year deal, which is cool. I bet you were going to get 1 or 2 matches, tag matches, and then you're going to have him be in a more managerial role, possibly with Darby Allin, right? Because they're using their legends in that regard, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how they do this. So I did see people dumping on it. I saw both sides. Yeah. One, it became, oh my God, this is WCW all over again, right? I got that. And I'm like, okay. So I'm friends with one of these guys. So he wrote that on his Facebook. I was like, okay, what's the issue with it? He goes, oh, look at all these old guys there. All these old guys. I'm like, dude, the old guys are there to propel the young talent into main spots. Like, you're not seeing Arn Anderson have a match. You're not seeing DDP have a match. They're just there. And they're like, well, they shouldn't be. I'm like, you want to tell them that they shouldn't be employed? They shouldn't be making money? Is that what you're telling me? That because they've hit a certain age, they shouldn't have a job? It's one thing to complain about, you know, a Hogan being the champion and, you know, the younger guys not being able to get the title. Another thing is to complain that these guys just are employed. Exactly. So it only elevates what we're seeing. So I saw both sides. And then the other side was, oh, you see, WWE treated him so badly that he left. I got to tell you, Sting and WWE's relationship is great.
Right.
It's not a bad relationship. They're not on bad terms. It's all business. It's a business decision. He wanted to maybe do a little more. WWE didn't have it in their plan for him, and he went to another company. That's it. It's done.
It's also like the thing with WWE trying to really put those last nails in the coffin of WCW, you know? So like what happens with Sting? Sting comes out, he has a couple of matches, he gets hurt. Okay, now you're an alumni, you get a Legends deal. We're not really going to do anything with you, just collect your paycheck and that's it, you know? Like we'll sell you merch.
We'll book you for conventions.
Right. And then, you know, for a guy like Sting who may turn around and say, "Hey, look, I have more to contribute. I would like to get into the ring. I feel like I could get into the ring. I feel like I could still be a presence in the business, not main eventing shows or getting the title, but still being there." I think that's great. You know, like good for him. And it seems like that's the overall mantra of AEW, where Cody has such a legacy from Dusty and Dustin, where he's bringing these guys in to help the younger talent, and that's exactly what they're doing. You know. Yeah. But Arn Anderson,
very interesting to think about this, right? You know what I would want to see? I want to see next week Jericho come out. Sting comes out, cuts a promo. Jericho comes out and talks about how he's taking time away from the young guys and that he's here to put himself over, and this isn't WCW anymore. But cool to see him back on Turner, you know, on TNT after 19 years.
Oh, forget it. Yeah.
You know, wild. That was Tony Schiavone losing his mind was awesome. You know, him screaming at Sting, doing the whole thing. Really cool. I'm very interested to see where this goes. However, I got one criticism. I think this possibly overshadowed the main event just a little bit.
Do you think so? I think it hyped people up for the main event. I was on such an adrenaline rush that I was ready for the big fight feel that was presented after.
Yeah, this is going to lead into something interesting. So so we had that moment, very cool. Now let's go into the big story here, and that's Jon Moxley, Kenny Omega. This is the last match. Jon Moxley beat Kenny Omega, but it wasn't a wrestling match. It was this non-sanctioned hardcore match. Don Callis was on commentary. Again, second time, right? Callis, this time they made a point to say Impact Wrestling, to have it on his lower third. He thanked Tony Khan for the partnership with Impact Wrestling. And at that moment, I go, aha. I get it now. This is getting interesting. This is something that they're going to do. Because I believe I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that it was possible that they would link up, right? And I want you to think about this. There's a wrestling show on TNT, right? On TNT with NWA representation, which is WCW, right? The NWA became WCW. And then you have Impact Wrestling representation, which the NWA became Impact Wrestling, TNA Wrestling.
Bananas.
What a bizarre, and it's WC. I mean, this is the legacy of WCW. I mean, we really, to kind of look at it this way, and I never wanted to compare it. I hate doing that comparison because WCW had such a bad last, I guess, 18 months in the history of the company. But
absolutely,
this is the legacy. I mean, all of this is the incarnation of the NWA and the legacy of that Flair era NWA. You know, this is the second cousin of the Crockett promotions and Mid-Atlantic Wrestling and you know, the expansion of the NWA. This AEW is the culmination of all this. And I listen, really cool to think about it that way, that we still have that lineage still connected in some capacity that's not WWE related on a mainstream level.
Oh, 100%, man. So like going kind of piggytailing on your analogy, would AEW almost be like the Terminator 2 of the wrestling franchise compared to like NWA and WCW, because it's been done before, and it's failed, right? It seems like these guys are just on such a win streak over the last year and a half or however many, whatever, that they're doing such cool stuff, you know, and I as a fan really appreciate it. I know you appreciate it. I know we were talking with MG Geek last night in our group text. This guy really appreciates it. Do you think Tony Khan goes home and says, "You know what? I am the world's greatest wrestling fan.
I think so.
I made it happen."
You know what though? You gotta for all the shit that this guy gets, you gotta
Yeah.
look at the really interesting setup he's created here, right? That relationship with the Pumpkin Smasher and NWA, the relationship with Impact Wrestling, very me as a wrestling fan. This is all like, and I'm telling you, like the 14-year-old kid in him is giddy. Has to find this very
100%.
interesting. And by the way, the ECW connection, the FTW title is on there. He has. Listen, I'm not fanboying over this, and I'm not even talking about storyline wise, but as a 36-year-old, soon to be 37-year-old that grew up in the 80s and 90s era of wrestling,
Absolutely.
my God, to have one show with ECW being represented, NWA being represented, WCW being represented, Impact, TNA being represented. This is it's kind of become that thing that we were talking about years ago, where all that all in pay-per-view was gonna be the independent version of WrestleMania.
Yeah.
The only thing missing is New Japan, and I'm telling you, the tie-in is still there. There's still
And
that
Ring of Honor.
connection, and it's gonna happen. Ring of Honor is the only one that really there's not much happening, which I find interesting. But
yeah,
I got it. Very cool to see before we go into this main event and talk about what happened. So now,
super cool.
Super cool. Very good main event. What did you think of the match?
I really enjoyed it. It was a very good, hard-hitting match. There's a reason why these guys are the main event. There's a reason why these guys are regarded as two of the best in the world. And they put on a clinic, like when you have your heels and faces on both sides of the ring, it seems like not only were they wrestling for the fans at home, the fans in the audience, but they were wrestling for the wrestlers out in front, basically saying like, hey, if you want to get to the big times in this company, you got to do some shit like this,
Yeah. So we saw this match. They had a hard-hitting match, very good match. So at one point, Kenny gets hurt, right? He gets hurt. Callis comes down and gets on the apron, on the walkway, and starts screaming to the ref, he's hurt. John Moxley comes over and knocks him on his ass. Kenny Omega hits him with the microphone because Callis had a mic, throws the mic in the ring. I didn't even notice they did this, so I really liked how it happened. And JR, I think, caught it and did a great job at explaining how did that microphone get from Don Callis to Kenny Omega?
Right.
And he waffles him in the head, hits the one-winged angel, and gets the 3 count. New AEW World Heavyweight Champion, Kenny Omega, first time with the title. He is a total heel. The cleaner's back. And I did not expect the ending. I thought we would get a big celebration in the ring because this is guys, this is the man, right? This is the guy that AEW was built on, right? The guy that the whole thing depended on. What does he do? Him and Don Callis grab that fucking belt and they run out the building.
Great heel move.
Run out the building. I forgot who I don't know if it was Marvez or who, but goes, what the hell just happened? And Callis goes, you'll find out on Tuesday. Announcer goes, no, Dynamite's on Wednesday. He goes, on Impact. Gets in the car and takes off.
I almost did a backflip.
What just happened? What did we just see?
Like it cool moment, man. Like super cool moment. There's no other words to describe. Like as a wrestling fan, I was on my couch. My wife went to sleep early, and I woke her up because it was one of those moments where you're sitting there and you go, "Oh, it's happening," So I'm excited. I don't get access, so I'm gonna have to figure out a way to watch it. I think a lot of people are in the same boat.
Yeah, a lot of people are in the same boat with this. I imagine they're gonna replay a lot of it on AEW programming next week, but I believe you can watch online. I don't think they're only on. I think you can watch on Twitch. I don't know. I think so, but I've been watching because I record them. So I watch them like a couple days later. I gotta tell you, let me just before, and then all the crap came in. Oh my God, Impact. It's not the same Impact. It's a very different company. This isn't TNA. It's not. It's nothing like Impact that you knew of. The only thing that bothers me the most is Josh Matthews on there. I don't care for him on commentary.
Really?
This isn't a personal knock at him at all. It doesn't do it for me. Just not my thing. So that's the only criticism I have of it. I think the product's been really good. They have some really great talent there. Now, there will be a crossover here, okay? Let's talk about this. The big boy voice. So what he does is he makes his voice deeper on the tapings. That's what bothers me about him.
Really?
Yeah. They play with his levels a little bit. So let's talk about this. There will be a crossover. So I made a joke yesterday. I'm like, oh, look at Gallows and Anderson do a run in here. We're going to see this. We're going to see Gallows and Anderson. I mean, quite possibly when he's on Impact, I mean, imagine they come out, they embrace him, they do this whole thing, and it's him and Gallows and Anderson versus, maybe the Bucks get involved somehow, maybe there's a turn. The possibilities are endless here, and there's also a lot of great matches to have. You got to remember, Impact has a very strong women's division.
Yes.
So seeing that play a part in AEW would be great, to see some interesting matches, to see the crossover like the North. Ethan Page is he's been one of my favorite wrestlers as far as on that level goes. We've seen him 1,000 times in Evolve. To elevate this guy, you got to look at who benefits from this. 100% Impact is going to benefit. 100%. It's all about Impact. But it is interesting to know, think about the talent that could come over. Guys, we could get Darby Allin and Ethan Page again. I believe I was with Ayaz. Ayaz and I were at a show, the Grape Ayaz Akhtar, tech expert Ayaz Akhtar from CBS. Ayaz and I were at one of the shows, and I believe that was the one that Ethan Page picked up Darby Allin. And think about this. So there's a podium, right? So there's the ring, there's some space, there's a ringside seats, and then there's a podium, like bleachers. From the bleachers, he picked them up, like gorilla pressed them, threw him into the pillar, into the ring post, and snapped them in half. If we can see that match, I'll lose my mind. I would love it. FTR and Machine Guns. FTR and Gallows and Anderson. I mean, there's a lot of really good matchups you could have. Listen, if this is short term, great. Great. No problem. I don't want it to become a long-term thing. I think these every now and then do like some sort of invasion would be a great idea.
Oh, yeah.
But very interesting to see, and that's how the show ends.
Chills.
Really cool. Now, I'm curious what it's going to do in the ratings. It was a very hot match. It wasn't a lot of competition on TV. There was an NFL game in the afternoon, which ended before this, obviously. Rare for a Wednesday NFL game, but we're in a crazy era right now. But, you got Sting, you got this match, you got the Impact thing. We're on to something here. We're on to something. The next couple of weeks, very interesting.
Do you think the Sting appearance brought casual fans over from... Josh is a good example. When Josh texted you, hey, Sting's on TV. Do you think there were people who were watching who know of other fans who said, hey, put on Channel 3 right now, put on TNT. Oh my God. Do you think that boosted their numbers enough to get people to watch that last quarter of the show?
I don't know, but you know what? I didn't even think of that as a strategy, but that 100% probably was the strategy there. Put Sting on right before that, get them to kind of show interest in that match, and then go into it. You explaining it that way, I 100% think that was a strategy, and I think it was a good strategy, because I messaged 3 people that don't watch AEW, are kind of into wrestling, but not really. I messaged them Sting's on AEW, and they turned it on.
Yeah, kind of the same thing here. Like I got like an Instagram group chat with a bunch of wrestling fans, and that immediately, because like Dynamite is super, or TNT is super good with putting out those graphics when something happens. Like they're locked and loaded, ready to go. And maybe like 2 minutes after Sting showed up, you got the Sting is all elite graphic.
Yeah,
it was really cool, man.
Yeah, guys, submit your questions. Get your questions ready. We got a couple more topics to talk about, but we're going to do a Q&A here because I'm sure a lot of you have questions going into the next couple weeks. Tribute for the Troops airs this Sunday afternoon on Fox in a non-football window. Interesting, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious how this will do in the ratings. Sunday afternoon, wrestling on Fox. What a crazy... Everything comes full circle, huh?
Yeah.
Everything comes full circle. You got Drew McIntyre and The Miz in a non-title match. You got Natty and Bayley versus Bianca Belair and Sasha Banks. I'm interested to see that team happen.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Bryan, Jeff Hardy, Rey Mysterio, and the tag team champions, the Street Profits, versus Baron Corbin, Bobby Roode, Dolph Ziggler, Elias, and the IC champion, Sami Zayn.
Solid show.
Okay. You know what? You don't have to do something insane for this. It's a filler. I think the message is great that they're still doing tribute for the troops. They're on a Sunday afternoon on Fox. It'll do pretty good. A lot of families are going to watch. The household viewership will be up. How many people per house? Yeah. The per household viewership will be definitely up. And just another thing to watch. Very cool. Very cool. It is competing, I believe, right, with NXT.
NXT starts at what, like 7:00?
Yeah, what time is this on? Somebody give me the time. I don't have it.
I am not 100% sure. I assumed it was like early afternoon because you need that lead in, right? Like, why would they counter program themselves? I feel like they're not that dumb, Andrew.
Well, it could have been like a network decision. We need the show. This is the time we're putting it out. Sorry. It very much could have been that.
Let's take a look here.
Yeah.
Tribute to the Troops. 4 p.m.
4 or 5. Okay, so fine. It's a lead-in. Okay, yeah, it looks good. Yeah. Very cool. I'm gonna watch it definitely. Let's do some Q&As, guys. If you're watching this on any of the number of the platforms that we're on, head on over to our YouTube. It makes it a lot easier for me to follow and for Rich to sort these questions. Submit your questions, whatever you want it to be, and we'll do our best to answer them.
All right, first question from JGore492. What matches would you want to see between Impact and AEW? Give me 3, and I'll give you
my 1, Kenny Omega and Ken Shamrock. The Battle of the Kennys. Kenny versus Kenny.
Awesome.
I want to see that. I don't care for anything else. I just want to see Ken Shamrock get involved in something. I want to see Ken Shamrock and Jericho. What if we do that?
Yes.
I want to see Ken Shamrock in everything.
I bet you an AEW guy is going to take an Impact belt.
An AEW guy will take an Impact belt. I don't know how deep the crossover is going to be. Now, obviously,
Cody.
There's a lot of these. Maybe Cody. Listen, there's going to be a lot of this. We're in the what if game now, so there's a ton of these matches they could do. I want to see the North.
Brody gets that Impact belt.
Oh yeah, I want to see the North. I want to see that. I want to see the Good Brothers. The Bucks do something. The Bucks tweeted out a picture of them with the Impact, with the TNA logo in the back. I thought that was really funny. I don't know. What do you want to see?
FTR versus the North, obviously. I want to see any tag team from AEW versus Gallows and Anderson. I would like to see Brody get that belt. I think that would be kind of cool because Brody's been missing. And I think it would definitely pop the territory, quote unquote, to have some of these guys show up, to have some of the heels show up on Impact. Next question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Audio Revolver asks, with a working relationship between that AEW is making, would Dynamite overtake Raw in 2021 ratings?
I would say no.
Interesting. Okay.
I would say no because remember they're still under the 1 million mark, right? And right now, I believe with DVR numbers, they're getting about 1.2 to 1.4 million. So they're doing okay. But the WWE is such a machine. It won't happen in 2021. Wrestling needs to get really hot. Like really, really hot for this to become a thing. I don't know. I think it's hot for us because we're fans, but I'm saying like mainstream hot. I don't know if there's any TV product that could do what we did in the 90s again. But you know what? Maybe there'll be a week that they do a blockbuster number that's pretty close, but I don't see them overtaking Raw. I really don't.
Okay. All right. I'll agree with you. Let's move on. Bachelor 3000. Do you think the Dark Order will slowly but surely win Hangman over to join them? Because they're courting him now.
They are. They are courting him. I'm gonna say no. What do you think?
I think Hangman needs to be a babyface at this point. He'll turn next year. We still have the mystery of who knocked out Mox from last week, too.
Sorry, I'm getting 500 messages here. Let's go to another question.
The grape Ayaz Akhtar. With all the companies working together, where does Tessa end up?
Tessa ends up in WWE.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she goes to WWE.
Do you think Don Callis, this is from Lone Wolf, do you think Don Callis will get Jericho as well?
I think so. I think Jericho will make a cameo. I don't think he's going to have a match in Impact, but I think he'll definitely show up and do something there. Something comedic.
Okay. I'll agree with that. I think he'll say, like, what the hell's going on? What is this show?
Yeah.
What is this basement run nonsense you guys are doing?
Do you remember, like, in 2006, he teased that he was going to Impact?
Yes.
Where on his website, he put, you remember, like, his thing, this thing? He put a thing and it said TNA on the back.
Yes.
So, I think that tease has been building up for, like, 16 years.
I agree with that. I think that would be funny. Scar Happy. I don't want to say this one word in the sentence because I feel like you're gonna go bananas. Is this gonna be invasion or is this gonna be a talent swap, talent sharing?
I don't know. I think that's a great question. I don't know. I think it's too early. They've done a great job of kayfabing it. Even people within Impact that heard the rumors, management denied it.
Yes. They have been kayfabing. I think a lot of the New Japan stuff is also kayfabing. You're gonna see. So I think they play it so close to the vest that, and it doesn't seem like there's leaks on either side.
Yeah,
it's very tight knit. I think we're gonna get some really even cooler surprises if they're surprising you with Sting and an Impact drop on a weekly show, not a pay-per-view. I guarantee you there's gonna be more insane stuff coming before the end of the year and at the start of the new year.
Yeah, I'll probably have more information next couple days about this, but there's a lot of these. There's a lot of champion versus champion matches that you could do. There's a lot of these, bizarre dream matches on a small scale that you could see happening.
Ooh, here's a good one from Eric Prezano. What happens to Davey Boy Smith Jr.? He said he's done with MLW.
I see this guy going to WWE.
Yes,
but
NXT.
I don't. He's interesting how he hasn't gone there again. He hasn't gone back. He's been gone for a very long time. And you look at this guy, like, great wrestler, really good grappler. Like, he's a great judo guy, great physique. They just never did it with him. They made him into, like, this bizarre character at one point, and then he left. They let him go, and he's made a name for himself. You're doing his small stuff. So I don't know. Maybe it's him. Maybe he doesn't want to commit to a big schedule. Maybe he's happy with his life.
I got the answer for you.
Yeah.
As you were saying before, you think Pat McAfee is going to find a way to get out of that War Games match.
Oh, bring Davey in?
What better way
but great, yeah,
to say, hey, you know what? I got to name my replacement. It's Davey Boy Smith Jr. And you have, like, this giant person teaming with Oney Lorcan, et cetera, et cetera.
Dude, you know what? I never even thought about him going to NXT. I think that's a great place for him to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Just looking through your questions. WrestleManiac 82, with Aew being in the Women's War Games, do you think she takes the pin to set up her next challenger?
I think that's a great question. Very possible. Who's next for her on that list?
Let's see.
Are they going to go back to Candice?
I think there could be another thing cooking with Candice. It could be anybody, really, right?
You know what? Make it Toni Storm. Have Toni Storm beat her for the title. Then you got a slew of these matches. between Toni Storm and Rhea again. You could do Shotzi again. There's a lot of mix and match you could do with the NXT Women's division.
Duke Togo 13 says this is a comment, but I want to talk about it because it's very interesting. Someone mentioned that Sami Callihan could be the one that attacked Jon Moxley.
Ooh,
that would be a lot of fun, and I think that sets up a good inter-promotion match with Sami Callihan saying, "Hey, you left me behind." Weren't they called like the wife beaters or something?
Something like that. Yeah, I think so. But I mean, you got Callihan, and you got great story in between the two. You know, Callahan's a good hand, so why not? Why not?
It also could just be Eddie Kingston.
Mm-hmm. Could be Eddie Kingston too. But you remember how he laid? He laid like the Hangman.
Yes.
The tarot card. I thought that was pretty cool. It could have just been a coincidence, but very, very interesting if it's not.
Could be Gallows. Because he's the Gallows. Yeah. Jonathan asks, will you love me harder?
No, I'm the hardest I could possibly be right now.
Oh boy.
I'm the hardest I could be.
Another question from Jago. Are Darby and Sting has to be the plan, or they maybe do Sting versus Cody? Cody has always said that Sting was his favorite wrestler as a kid, could play off that story. I think they're teaming up, man. I think Sting's last match is going to be him teaming with Cody, Darby, and Dustin versus the bad guys, Team Taz.
Okay. Again, yeah. I'm into it. I'm into it
Absolutely. All. Alexander asks, what does WWE do to respond to AEW Impact NWA? And what kind of Rolex are you rocking?
I'm rocking a mother of pearl Datejust.
Why are you wearing your Rolex right now?
I was out, and I have to run out of here and go to a meeting quickly after this.
I like the juxtaposition of your Gabagool shirt and
with
Rolex.
my Rolex.
Because you're ready to party and also maybe do some finance.
It's my look. I'm wearing my Jordans too. I got a bizarre look here. Very bizarre look.
And Jordans.
Let's see. What else do we have? Jonathan asks, which Christmas tree is Andrew's favorite? The one in my bedroom, actually, is my favorite one.
7 Christmas trees.
7 Christmas trees in my house right now. If you guys don't follow me on social media, at Andrews Arian on Instagram and Twitter. You can see all my Christmas trees.
Do you throw them out?
No, they're reusable.
You put them in the basement?
I put them in the attic.
You have I forgot you had an attic.
I do.
Let's see here. Why do you need 7 trees? That's like our last question.
I mean, that's not a question for me. I'm not the one that set up the trees. My wife has decorated the house into a winter wonderland. It's a Christmas wonderland in my house.
It looks good.
Yeah.
It looks good. You got a good house.
What else?
Marcel asks. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Marcel asks, will WWE ever go back to competitions for #1 contender?
I don't know. They change their minds all the time. They mentioned the word death. They called it a death match, right? Sudden death match, right? Or triple death match. What do they call it?
Sudden death?
They called it. They used the term death on Raw, and I thought that was a banned word in that company, but they called it. So
they're gonna get more edgy.
A little bit. They're gonna have to listen. They're gonna have to get a little bit more edgy because a lot of it also has to do with customer retention, right? Viewer retention. So sudden death, there you go. Thank you, MG Geek. When you're looking at the John Cena era, right? All those young kids, mostly 8-year-old boys that were big John Cena fans. These guys are now teenagers. They're in their early 20s, late teens, early 20s. Very easily now, you could grab those guys back by doing something interesting. Be a little bit more adult. Tiny bit.
I agree with that. But is WWE so far ahead of what's going on with the modern wrestling fan that they're just still going to do status quo shit unless they feel a threat? Like let's say Dynamite moves to Monday night, they take on Raw 3 hours versus 2 hours. At some point, like you said, if the industry gets like super, super effing hot, is it a question for you? Is it a possibility TNT might say, F them, let's go for it. We're putting you against Monday Night Raw.
No. They're never going to do that. Okay. It would be a stupid mistake because remember, your batch, you've taken the viewership and you've taken 30% of your viewers and you've given it to another company on Wednesdays. So and NXT is not Raw. At the end of the day, we could talk about the problems of Raw. At the end of the day, it's the institution. That's what people know is wrestling. So you don't want to go head to head with that. We're not in that point yet.
Right.
Listen, maybe a couple years from now you want to do it, but why do it? You don't need to be competing at the same time anymore. Viewership has changed. The way we consume media is totally different. Both could exist, and both don't have to be enemies very easily.
I'll agree with that. I also think that you could sooner see a supplementary experiment. You'll have Wednesday Night Dynamite, and then maybe on a Friday night, they'll say, hey, we're doing an extra Dynamite on a Friday night that goes completely against SmackDown just to test the waters. There's no harm in that either. It's
possible. They could do that. Very possible. Right now, SmackDown is the monster. That's the monster right now. Getting over 2 million views. I don't know. I think next year, WWE has answers to this. I'm just putting it out there.
Absolutely.
WWE has a lot. I would say, without saying too much, what AEW is doing right now is a counter to what they expect WWE to do in 2021.
Interesting.
Okay, I'll put that out there. They're getting ahead of the story. They're getting ahead of what's about to happen in WWE.
Okay.
Listen, at the end of the day, WWE is not a dumb company. We could complain about their TV. They are fully aware of the issues, and they have an idea of what they're looking to do. Now, whether or not they go forward with this, and they really, and you can see the parts, right? We could see what's happened right now. You got all these people coming back next year. You got a blockbuster WrestleMania.
Oh yeah,
possibly. So there's a lot of moving parts on that side. AEW understands that this is only going to straighten them. There was a comment in the chat room. Does it make them look less of a mainstream product, less of a bigger product because they're working with these lower promotions? I don't see it that way. And those lower promotions also, to the casual fan, they don't even know what they are. They don't know how low they are. They just know it's another group. When we watched Raw and ECW came in, nobody ever said, well, look, this made WWE look like a bunch of, mid-carders or everybody because they're working with ECW. It's just a program happening. It's just something that they're doing right now. So, listen, it all depends on how it's written out, not the actual act of doing what they're doing. It's how it's going to play out. That's going to be the big story. If they start losing out to these guys and it looks like a joke, it's going to look like crap, and people are going to say, yeah, this hurt them. But to have more talent and do something unique, it changes things, and it's not as predictable. And I think that's a problem for a lot of people. People love the pattern, even though they like complaining about it. And I'm not saying this is what's happening. I'm not alluding this to the question. I'm moving on to something else. People love a pattern, even though they hate a pattern. And when you change that pattern, when you change their expectation and their predictability of something, they get wonky because I did not see this coming. It wasn't my thought. Like you said, it's a lot of people pretend they're writers. And we don't know what the 6-week outlook of this is. We don't know what the 2-month, 3-month outlook is. We just know the moment. So I like to let things play out. I get it, people aren't into this, but I think it's pretty cool that we're seeing a weird relationship amongst different groups.
Oh, forget it. Yeah, that I always found that super cool. Like the All In show. The All In show is awesome. I'll even go so far as to say that New Japan Ring of Honor show at the Garden, super cool. Like everybody goes home happy. So there's an interesting kind of comment in the chat room here that we should just talk about real quick, because we kind of talked about it at the beginning of the show. King of Strong Style says, I want to know how everybody hates when Undertaker wrestles Goldberg or Brock Lesnar, and everybody hates part-timers. Now AEW signs Sting, and we're okay with it. I'll tell you why we're okay with it.
Yeah, you tell me. And I agree with him on this. I agree with him 100%, and I'm going to tell you why. You go.
I think the reason why we're okay with Sting happening is because I feel like we're conditioned to know we're conditioned to see the writing on the wall as far as wrestling. Sting is not going to get that belt. He's not going to be in the main event picture. Whereas when Goldberg gets announced for WWE television, the dude's gonna get some kind of insane accolade that he doesn't need. I think that's the main difference between relying on your star for nostalgia and putting a belt on him, or doing something cool for the fans.
I think that explains. You dropped it perfectly.
It's fan service, 100%. And how many fans that who went and like MGG couldn't stop talking about it. You know, like Sting's his favorite guy, but he knows better. He knows he's not sitting there going, "Oh man, I can't wait for him to beat Kenny Omega and get that title." You know, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. So exactly that, right? There's no. We know that AEW is not going to position Sting to be the man. You know, we know that. Jake Roberts is not going to be that guy. We know that Arn is not going to be that guy. That's not the approach they're taking. They're using these guys to elevate the product to a more casual fan that has dissipated. However, here's the other thing. I have no problem with Bill Goldberg being on WWE TV. I have no problem with Brock Lesnar. I have no problem with any of the part-timers because it does exactly what it's supposed to. It gets eyeballs that generally don't watch your product, and you're able to show other people. Whether or not you like how they do it, that's your preference, and I get it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I've never been the one that complains when the older guys come back. I've never said it because I understand what the point is. And you got to look at it this way. They've had a difficult time creating these guys. We grew up in a very special moment where you had top talent, top to bottom. Right? We grew up in that transitionary period between the 80s and the 2000s. You had the Hogans and the Warriors and the Flairs and all these guys meeting that younger generation. We are not in that era. Those eras come and by the way, take a drink every time I say era. Those eras show up every 20 to 30 years, if that. We grew up in a very unique moment in pro wrestling.
Absolutely.
We never had stars on that level. Ever in the history of the sport, 100-year sport, you never had stars on that level when you compare it to the 80s and 90s. So, of course, these companies are going to want to rely on the star power because we just don't watch television the same way. We don't get behind products the same way, and they're using it to jumpstart more eyeballs. If they could catch another 5,000 people that commit every week by doing this, great. Now, my problem is if your entire company relies on this, which we saw that happen in TNA. TNA did it a really wrong way, where they highlighted these guys and they became the product. AEW's not going to go down that road. WWE doesn't go down that road, but I love it when you have these dream matches. When Undertaker's having a match with Goldberg, listen, it doesn't need to be a great match. I just enjoy it for what it is. I'm able to separate myself and say, I'm not watching this to be an Omega Okada match. I'm watching it because it's freaking Bill Goldberg against The Undertaker. They're going to do their cool entrances. They'll do something in the ring for 10 minutes and it's done.
I think I'm done on that note.
You're done. All right, let's wrap it up, guys. This was a lot of fun. We're going to turn into pumpkins now and be stored away till next Halloween. All right, guys. Remember, subscribe to us where everywhere podcasts are available. Subscribe to us here on YouTube. Love the chat room. We'll be back possibly Sunday night. I'll give you guys an update here. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, dude.
But we'll see y'all next time. Take care.